Restrict the wanton flesh. Truly, there is no quicker means by which a life can be upheaved and sifted than by the depredations of uncontrolled desire. What availeth the concourse of a prostitute, the attention of a loose companion? Nothing. And what are the fruit of such unions? Only sorrow is born, only misery is multiplied. Within these things, the outsider dwells.
This is the sixth and perhaps most applicable of these 7 strictures, at least in its relation to the other half of the Abbey of the Everyman, the Sisters of the Oracular Order, a group that not only consists purely of women, but one that is also, quite literally, blind, or at least it would seem, as while they may present themselves as those without sight, they seem to have quite a lot of it, being able to make predictions and create prophecies that always come to fruition. Through these prophecies, much change has come to not only the Empire of the Isles, but also the whole of the Dishonored universe, be it through the actions of the Abbey or the Order, or some third party whose intentions would only become known as their actions were completed. So with that fairly cryptic introduction done, it seems that we can move on to what exactly the topic of this video is, that being the Sisters of the Oracular Order, a sort of splinter group of the Abbey of the Everyman which, like the introduction stated, consists entirely of women, who are commonly believed, at least by the masses, to actually be blind, though their ocular coverings have less to do with the stricture about restricting wanton flesh, and more to do with what exactly their function is within the Abbey. But before we move on to what exactly their purpose is, though I've already alluded to it would be better to begin with what exactly, or rather who exactly, the Order began with. The reason as to why I say who and not where or how is because the actual origin of the Sisters of the Oracular Order is wrapped in mystery and honestly just a lack of there being anything on it. Instead, the most amount of peering into the past that we can do when talking about the Oracular Order is with its High Oracles, who are similar, at least to some degree, to the High Overseers of the Abbey. That said, while we do know a few of the High Oracles of the Oracular Order, there is, once again, not much on them. What we do know is that the founder was a woman by the name of High Oracle and Overseer, Gwen Horncroft, who, as displayed in one of the rooms in the office of the High Overseer, was the first woman inducted into the Abbey of the Everyman, and is stated to have had her insights align the Abbey in their time of need. As to what this means could be very many things, though it likely hints at the purpose of the Oracular Order, which, once again, will be something we'll get to soon enough. On top of this, it's stated that she succumbed to madness, which, while ominous and honestly knowing the Abbey may not be true, might as well be the case, given the nature of her vocation. After the founder, however, the High Oracles become sparse and hard to research, with the only two ever being mentioned being Dahlia Simonos, who was the first Sakonan to be inducted, and subsequently killed by outsider cultists, and Pelagia Themis, who is the High Oracle at the time of the events of Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider. Knowing all this then, a good way to continue in the exploration of the Oracular Order, and what eventually leads to their and the Abbey's demise, would be to look at what I've been foreshadowing since the beginning of this video, their function. The Oracular Order's function, then, is one that simply involves making predictions and giving counsel based on those predictions. As to how a consensus is reached for counseling is something that, in general, involves what they've deemed as cloistered gatherings, a practice in which none but the sisters enter a heavily incensed room to discuss various problems within the Isles, based on predictions, which I'll talk about in just a second, be them immediate problems of great consequence or smaller ones with subsequently smaller consequences. These meetings involve the gathering of 30 or so sisters in a circle until the room in question is completely full. Then, before any can talk about the problems at hand, all sisters are given time to research the topics, with certain sisters being given the task of furthering unlikely scenarios and unpopular opinions. Once all the sisters have finished their research, the discussion begins, with each sister having to give their input, as none are allowed to be silent, so that by the end of the discussion, all of them are well versed on the topic and can provide counsel on any sort of situation that may arise. Once this discussion has come to an end, an opinion is written, one that all of the oracles, including the High Oracle, must agree with. As a result, these meetings can take quite a long time and almost always produce successful results. That said, these cloister gatherings are only how decisions are reached concerning predictions, and to be honest, isn't even the reason why the common folk think of the sisters the way they do. That comes down to their physical look, and more so, predictions, and how exactly those predictions are reached. These predictions are referred to as prophecies or visions, and can come to sisters through what they refer to as a ritual of prophecy, in which they attempt to seek heretical influences and just general wrongdoings involving the void. The exact details surrounding the ritual aren't known, like many other things about the Order, and as a result, it's also not known if the rituals themselves are even needed for a sister to have visions about the future at all, or what exactly causes these visions in the first place, as the visions, at least before the events of Dishonored 2, were essentially always accurate, with many high overseers giving them and the Oracular Order's opinions great amounts of personal endorsement. Though, like I said, with the events of Dishonored 2, it was shown that through the power of void magic, dead sisters, and technology, the predictions of the Oracular Order could be changed. Something that ultimately led to the Order and the Abbey eventually discovering what had gone wrong, and through attempting to find a solution, should it ever happen again in the future, discovering a plot to kill the Outsider and potentially destroy the Abbey of the Everyman, though that would of course be a story for another time. This manipulation of the visions of the sisters through the void by Delilah's coven in Dishonored 2 poses quite a few questions. The first being that if the visions could be manipulated by void magic through the Oraculum, which is what the device was known as, then perhaps the link between the so-called heretics and the Abbey was far closer than it initially seems, and that perhaps the Order has been using void magic the entire time to predict the future, something that, if true, would have altogether branded the Abbey and the Order as heretics in the eyes of the public. Though then again, none of that could be true at all, as the void itself is something that does not necessitate an active connection to the mortal realm to have an effect on it, and that the use of deceased sisters of the Oracular Order was a good enough connection to alter the prophecies. Whatever the case may be, it seems that these visions of the sisters of the Oracular Order have a clear connection to the void in some way, shape, or form, as everything in the Dishonored universe seemingly does, be it wanted or not. From here, similar to how we looked at various examples of the Abbey's work in the video I did on them, it would be best to look at the various prophecies made by the Oracular Order, and how exactly they have and continually affect the world of Dishonored around them. Though that said, I will really only be going into depth on one prophecy, given the complexity that every prophecy presents. As such, my personal favorite, and perhaps most important prophecy to come out of the Order goes as such.
Our site shows us the Isles, from the trivial to the calamitous, a baker using sawdust instead of flour in Karnaca, a fishing net tangled around a dead child in Pottershed, a whisper between lovers in Dunwall Tower. Tonight, I witnessed the Outsider's final moments in the void. I've imparted the danger to my sisters, but I could not divulge the true nature of my vision. It would only invite the errant mind. Some may greet the Outsider's death with exultation, others would show more wisdom. I have not yet written to the High Oracle. I fear the event will come to pass before my message could reach her. No, I know what I must do to prevent this dissolution.
This prophecy is one that's found in the mission The Stolen Archive during the Death of the Outsider standalone expansion. It not only details how the sister Lena Rosewind saw her vision, but also her thoughts on it, and how she fears that it may bring upon the destruction of not only the Abbey, but also the natural order of things. This hence not only shows the accuracy of the visions that the Sisters of the Oracular Order have, but also their intuition in understanding these visions, which would then go on to explain why exactly their founder may have been inducted into the Order altogether, and how, if the Void was involved in any way, why she ultimately ended up going insane. So, with all that said, I think that it's once again time to bring this video to an end, by summarizing what exactly has been said and its overall implications. That being in the case of the Sisters of the Oracular Order, their origin is mired in mystery that, at least for now, has to be cleared. But their function in the Abbey and to the Empire of the Isles is one that is defined and known. That being that they serve the function of predictors and advisors, predicting events that may cause great harm and subsequently advising on how to prevent or stop them. Though it's through this prediction that the Oracular Order potentially creates problems for itself and the rest of the Isles, as seen in Dishonored 2 and Death of the Outsider, all the while thinking that it's doing good, similar to its Abbey counterpart. A counterpart that, just like the Order, is slowly declining. And a counterpart that, as we eventually come to find out, falls, just as the Oracular Order had predicted. But that perhaps is a story for another time. So with all that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you hated it, dislike. But please tell me why. And if you really liked it, perhaps subscribe? Anyways, thanks once again for watching, and until next time, I'll try not to see you.